The massive alien ship appeared above Earth like a dark storm cloud. It was 10 miles long and covered in weapons that could destroy entire cities. Admiral Zethkar stood on the bridge, his forearms crossed over his armored chest. His red eyes scanned the blue planet below. This would be easy, he thought. It always was. Send the standard message, he commanded his crew. His voice was deep and rough like grinding stones. The communication officer pressed several buttons. A holographic screen appeared showing Earth's major cities. The message was simple and had worked on hundreds of worlds before. Surrender or die. Admiral Zethkar expected panic. He expected desperate messages begging for mercy. He expected military ships to launch futile attacks against his massive fleet. What he got instead was completely different. A small video message appeared on his screen. An elderly human woman with silver hair was kneeling in a garden planting flowers. She looked up at the camera and smiled warmly. "Oh my, visitors from space. How wonderful," she said, brushing dirt from her hands. "I'm Margaret Chen. Welcome to Earth. You must be tired after your long journey. Would you like some tea? I just made fresh cookies." Admiral Zethkar stared at the screen. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Behind him, the bridge crew looked confused. The old woman continued talking. "I should warn you, our landing pads might not be big enough for your ship. It's quite impressive. But don't worry. You can land in Central Park. The grass is soft and the ducks won't mind sharing." The communication officer looked at his admiral. "Sir, should we respond to this?" Admiral Zethkar had conquered 47 worlds. He had destroyed entire civilizations. He had never been invited for tea and cookies. "Send the message again," he growled. Maybe they didn't understand. The same message went out. Surrender or die. This time, a different human answered. A young man in colorful clothes appeared on screen. He was juggling 3 balls while riding a unicycle. "Wow, alien friends. This is so cool," the man said, dropping 1 ball but catching it quickly. "I'm Dave. I run the welcome committee. Are you here for the art festival? We have face painting and live music. Oh, and the best pizza in the galaxy, though I guess you'd know better than me about that." Admiral Zethkar's second-in-command, Commander Vexidal, leaned forward. "Sir, I don't think they understand our threat." "Of course they understand." Admiral Zethkar snapped. "All species understand the threat of death. Send a clearer message." The third message was more direct. "We are the Galactic Confederation. We have come to conquer your world. Submit to our rule or we will destroy your cities." This time, an official response came from something called the Earth Cultural Exchange Department. A middle-aged man in a simple suit appeared on screen. "Greetings, Galactic Confederation. I'm Director Williams. We're so excited to meet you. A confederation sounds wonderful. We love cooperation. We've prepared welcome gifts for your crew, local art, music, and our famous chocolate. We hope you'll stay long enough to see our museums. We have so much to share." Admiral Zethkar stood up so fast his chair fell over. "They're mocking us!" But Commander Vextel shook her head slowly. "No, sir, I don't think they are. Look at their faces. Listen to their voices. They're actually happy to see us." The Admiral stared at the screen. The human was still talking about gift baskets and cultural tours. His smile looked real. His eyes were bright with genuine excitement. "This is impossible," Admiral Zethkar muttered. "Every species fears us. Every species fights or surrenders. What's wrong with these humans?" Commander Vextal accessed the ship's database. "Sir, our scouts report something strange. This planet has no military, no weapons, no armies, nothing. That's ridiculous. Every planet has defenses, not this one, sir. According to our scans, they destroyed all their weapons nearly 3,000 years ago. They turned their military bases into schools and hospitals." Admiral Zethkar felt a strange sensation in his chest. It took him a moment to realize what it was: confusion. In his long career of conquest, he had never felt confused. Another message arrived from Earth. This time it was a group of children holding a banner that read, "Welcome, space friends." They were singing a song about friendship and sharing. One little girl held up a drawing of stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. "We made this for you," she said, her missing front teeth making her lisp. "The big purple one is you. Do you like purple? It's my favorite color." The bridge fell silent. Hardened warriors who had destroyed civilizations watched human children sing songs about friendship. Some of the crew looked uncomfortable. A few actually looked sad. "Sir," the communication officer said quietly, They're asking if we want to visit their schools. They want to show us their art projects. Admiral Zethkar sat down heavily. He had trained his entire life for war. His species, the Vorthak, were born warriors. Their society was built on conquest and domination. They didn't understand peace. They didn't understand kindness. They certainly didn't understand people who offered cookies to their conquerors. Send another message, he ordered. Tell them we have weapons that can destroy their planet. The response came from a scientist named Dr. Martinez. She was standing in what looked like a classroom, surrounded by charts and books. Fascinating, she said. Planet-destroying weapons? We had those once long ago. They're in our Museum of Human Mistakes now. You should visit. It's quite educational. We learned so much from our violent past. It helped us build a better future. Museum of Human Mistakes? Admiral Zethkar repeated. Oh yes, we keep all our old war things there. Guns, bombs, military uniforms. Children visit to learn why we stopped fighting. It's very popular with school groups. Commander Vextal checked her scanner again. Sir, she's not lying. They really do have a museum filled with weapons. Advanced weapons. Some of them are more powerful than ours. Admiral Zethkar felt that strange feeling again. These humans had weapons more powerful than the Confederation's, and they kept them in museums. They let children look at them as examples of past mistakes. Another message arrived. This time it was the elderly woman from the garden again. She was holding a tray of cookies and a pot of tea. I hope you're still planning to visit, she said. I've made extra cookies. Chocolate chip. They're everyone's favorite. And I have beautiful flowers to show you. Gardens are so much nicer than wars, don't you think? The bridge was completely quiet now. Admiral Zethkar looked around at his crew. These were warriors who had never known defeat. They looked lost and confused. Sir, Commander Vextal said softly, what do we do with a species that won't fight us? Admiral Zethkar didn't have an answer. In all his years of conquest and all the Confederation's history, they had never encountered anything like this. Humans who offered friendship instead of resistance. People who kept their weapons in museums and gave tours to children. A species that had chosen peace so completely, they couldn't even understand the concept of war anymore. He looked at the screen where Margaret Chen was still smiling, still holding her cookies, still waiting for her new friends to come visit. For the first time in his life, Admiral Zethkar didn't know what to do next. Admiral Zethkar decided he needed to see these weapons for himself. If humans had put their military power in a museum, he would visit this museum. Perhaps seeing their old weapons would remind them how to use them. He took a shuttle down to Earth's surface with a squad of his best soldiers. They landed in Central Park, just as Margaret Chen had suggested. The soft grass felt strange under their heavy boots. They were used to landing on metal and concrete, not flowers and trees. A small group of humans waited for them. They held welcome signs and gift baskets. Children peeked out from behind their parents, eyes wide with excitement. One little boy waved at the aliens. Welcome to Earth, said Director Williams, the same man from the earlier message. We're so happy you're here. Are you ready for the grand tour? Admiral Zethkar ignored the pleasantries. Take us to your weapons museum now. Of course. The Smithsonian Museum of Human Mistakes. It's one of our most educational exhibits. Director Williams smiled. The children love it. Very important for understanding our history. They traveled in strange human vehicles that moved without weapons or armor. Admiral Zethkar noticed there were no guards, no checkpoints, no security of any kind. His soldiers looked around nervously. They had never been in a place without defenses. The museum building was simple and peaceful. Families walked in and out casually. A group of teenagers sat on the steps eating lunch and laughing. None of them seemed concerned about the armed alien warriors walking past them. Inside the museum, they met Professor Chen, Margaret Chen's grandson, as it turned out. He was a thin man with glasses and a gentle smile. He wore a simple shirt and pants, nothing like the elaborate uniforms the aliens were used to seeing on conquered worlds. Welcome to our Museum of Human Mistakes, Professor Chen said. This is where we keep reminders of our violent past. It helps us remember why we chose a different path. He led them through halls filled with displays. Admiral Zethkar expected to see primitive clubs and stone weapons. What he found instead made his blood run cold. Behind glass cases were weapons that made his advanced military technology look like toys. Rifles that could fire 1,000 rounds per minute. Bombs that could level entire cities in seconds. Missiles that could travel between continents and hit targets with perfect accuracy. This assault rifle could penetrate our best armor, Professor Chen explained calmly, as if he were discussing the weather. Very efficient killing machine. Of course, we learned later that making things was much more satisfying than destroying them. Commander Vextal scanned one of the weapons with her device. Her face went pale. "Sir," she whispered, "this single rifle has more firepower than our entire squad." Professor Chen overheard her. "Oh yes, we were quite good at making weapons." "Too good, really? That's why we stopped. Come, let me show you the nuclear section." The nuclear weapons display made Admiral Zethkar's hand shake. These humans had created bombs that could destroy entire continents. They had missiles that could carry these bombs across space to other planets. They had enough destructive power to crack worlds in half. This warhead could destroy an area the size of your entire fleet, Professor Chen said, pointing to a sleek metal cylinder. "We built thousands of them, kept them pointed at each other for decades. Very stressful time in our history, but these are just in a museum," stammered one of the alien soldiers. "Why don't you use them?" Professor Chen looked genuinely puzzled. "Why would we use them? They only destroy things. We prefer to build things now, much more interesting." They moved to another section filled with tanks, fighter jets, and military equipment. Each piece was more advanced than anything the Confederation had ever seen. The humans had developed ways to wage war that the galaxy's most powerful military had never imagined. "This tank could destroy 50 of our vehicles," Commander Vextal said quietly. "Oh, that old thing?" Professor Chen laughed. "We stopped using those when we realized growing food was more important than making craters. Much better use of resources." A group of school children entered the museum on a field trip. They gathered around the displays, listening to their teacher explain the exhibits. The children looked at the weapons with the same curiosity they might show for dinosaur bones or ancient pottery. "Why did people fight wars?" asked a little girl. "Because they didn't know better yet," the teacher replied. "People used to think fighting would solve their problems, but it only made more problems. That's why we keep these here, to remember that lesson." Admiral Zethkar watched the children. They looked at weapons of mass destruction like they were looking at relics from a forgotten age. To them, war was as ancient and impossible as magic or dragons. One boy noticed the alien visitors and ran over. "Are you real aliens?" he asked excitedly. "That's so cool. Do you want to see my favorite exhibit?" Before anyone could stop him, the boy grabbed Admiral Zethkar's armored hand and pulled him toward a display case. Inside was a collection of toy soldiers, small plastic figures in military uniforms. "These are soldiers," the boy explained seriously. "People used to pretend to be these for real. They would wear uniforms and carry guns and march around." "Isn't that weird?" Admiral Zethkar looked down at his own uniform, his own weapons, his own military bearing. To this child, everything he was looked like an ancient game. "Why is it weird?" Admiral Zethkar asked. The boy tilted his head, thinking. "Because real people are supposed to help each other, not hurt each other. Everyone knows that." The alien warriors stood in silence. Around them, families moved through the museum, learning about humanity's violent past as if it were ancient history. Children laughed and played. Parents explained exhibits patiently. Teenagers took pictures and joked with their friends. None of them looked afraid. None of them looked angry. They had surrounded themselves with the most deadly weapons ever created, and they felt perfectly safe because they had chosen not to use them. Professor Chen noticed the aliens' confusion. "I know it's hard to understand," he said kindly. "Visitors from warrior cultures always have trouble with our museum. You're probably wondering why we don't use these weapons." "Yes," Admiral Zethkar admitted. "Because we tried that for thousands of years," Professor Chen said. "We got very good at war, too good. We nearly destroyed ourselves learning how to kill each other efficiently. Then we realized something wonderful." "What?" Professor Chen smiled. "We were even better at peace." Outside the museum, Admiral Zethkar's soldiers gathered in a confused group. They had seen enough firepower to conquer the entire galaxy, sitting behind glass like museum pieces. They had watched human children learn about war like they were learning about dinosaurs, as something that existed long ago and far away. Commander Vextal approached her admiral. "Sir, what are your orders?" Admiral Zethkar looked back at the museum. Through the windows, he could see families still touring the exhibits. A young couple was reading about ancient military tactics while their baby slept peacefully in a stroller. These humans had the power to destroy his entire fleet, and they were using it to teach their children why violence was wrong. "I don't know," he admitted. "I honestly don't know." Back on his ship, Admiral Zethkar faced a problem no military commander had ever encountered. How do you conquer a species that doesn't understand conquest? How do you intimidate people who offer you cookies? He called an emergency meeting with the Confederation's high command. 12 species appeared on holographic screens, each one a master of warfare. They had conquered hundreds of worlds together. They had never failed to bring a planet under their control. "Report, Admiral," demanded General Crux of the Thanarian Empire. His insect-like face clicked with impatience. "Why haven't the humans surrendered yet?" They don't understand surrender, sir," Admiral Zethkar replied. "They don't understand war at all." Warlord Scythic, a massive reptilian creature, laughed. "Impossible. All species understand war. It's the natural state of existence. Not these humans, sir. They abandoned warfare 3,000 years ago. They've forgotten how to fight." The 12 military leaders fell silent. Finally, Supreme Commander Valdris spoke. She was ancient, even by alien standards, and had personally conquered more worlds than anyone in the Confederation's history. "Admiral, are you telling us that these humans have no military, no weapons, and no understanding of conflict?" "Yes, ma'am. They keep their old weapons in museums. Their children learn about war like it's ancient history." Another long silence. Then Supreme Commander Valdris accessed her computer. There is an old protocol for this situation. Code 347B. Educational Demonstration of Warfare. "I've never heard of that protocol," Admiral Zethkar said. "It's from the early days of the Confederation, over 2,000 years ago. It was written for species so primitive they couldn't understand the concept of surrender." She paused, looking embarrassed. "We're supposed to teach them about war by showing them how it works." General Crux laughed again. "Perfect. Show them our power, Admiral. Make them understand what war means." Admiral Zethkar received his new orders. Demonstrate warfare to the humans until they learned to fear it. The Confederation would stage mock battles in Earth's orbit, showing the humans what real military power looked like. The next morning, Admiral Zethkar's fleet began their demonstration. Ships moved in perfect formation, firing practice weapons that created massive explosions of light and sound. They performed complex battle maneuvers, showing off their tactical superiority. On Earth's surface, humans responded exactly as they had before, completely wrong. They gathered on rooftops and in parks with telescopes and cameras. They brought picnic baskets and blankets. Families made a day of it, watching the alien fleet like it was an elaborate fireworks display. "Look at that formation," one human called out. "It's beautiful." "The timing on those explosions is perfect," said another. "They must have practiced for years." Admiral Zethkar watched in growing frustration as humans cheered and applauded his military demonstrations. They were treating acts of war like entertainment. Dr. Sarah Martinez, Earth's leading expert on alien cultures, even published a scientific paper about the displays. She titled it "Observed Mating Rituals of Warrior Species" and described the fleet movements as an elaborate courtship dance. The synchronized movements and bright displays clearly indicate a species attempting to attract mates, she wrote. The loud noises and aggressive posturing are typical of many animal species during breeding season. Commander Vextal showed the paper to Admiral Zethkar. "Sir, they think we're trying to find wives." Admiral Zethkar threw the report across his cabin. "This is insane. We're demonstrating our military might and they think we're dancing." But the demonstrations continued because the protocol demanded it. Each day, the Confederation fleet performed more elaborate mock battles. They showed the humans every type of space combat, every military formation, every weapon system they possessed, and each day, the humans gathered to watch with growing enthusiasm. Food vendors set up near the best viewing spots. Artists painted pictures of the beautiful alien ships. Musicians composed songs inspired by the cosmic ballet happening overhead. Children drew pictures of the pretty lights in the sky. One group of teenagers even started rating the daily performances. They held up scorecards like judges at a competition. "Today's pincer movement gets an 8 out of 10, announced a girl with blue hair. "Nice execution, but they could use more spirals." "I give the explosion sequence a 9, said her friend. Great color coordination. Admiral Zethkar realized the humans weren't just misunderstanding his demonstrations, they were critiquing them. They were offering suggestions for improvement. A message arrived from Earth's Department of Cultural Affairs. Director Williams appeared on screen, smiling as always. Admiral Zethkar, we want to thank you for the wonderful performances. The whole planet is talking about them. We were wondering, would you be interested in adding music? We have some excellent composers who would love to collaborate. Collaborate? Admiral Zethkar sputtered. Oh yes! We could create a proper symphony to go with your formations. Maybe add some choreographed lighting effects. It would be the greatest artistic achievement in human history. Admiral Zethkar turned off the communication and sat down heavily. The humans wanted to turn his military demonstrations into art projects, but something else was happening that worried him even more. His own soldiers were starting to change. It began with small things. Soldiers who were supposed to be maintaining their weapons instead watched human children playing in the park below. Warriors who had known nothing but conquest their entire lives found themselves staring at Earth's gardens and wondering what it would be like to grow flowers instead of destroying them. Lieutenant Klaxtar, one of Admiral Zethkar's best officers, was caught painting. A human child had given him watercolors and paper during one of their shore leaves, and he had been trying to capture the beauty of a sunset. It's so peaceful. Sir, Klaxtar explained when Admiral Zethkar confronted him. I never noticed how beautiful things could be when they weren't exploding. Other soldiers reported similar experiences. Sergeant Vorth had learned to play human music on something called a guitar. Captain Zexmal had started helping with the harvest at a local farm. Dozens of warriors were abandoning their duties to participate in human activities. They're converting our soldiers without even trying, Commander Vextal reported. The humans aren't fighting us, they're just being themselves. And somehow that's more dangerous than any weapon. Admiral Zethkar realized the horrible truth. The Confederation had built their entire civilization around warfare. Their economy depended on conquest. Their social structure was based on military rank. Their identity came from being warriors, but these humans had found something better. They had discovered that peace was more satisfying than war, that creation was more rewarding than destruction, that cooperation was stronger than domination. And his soldiers were learning these lessons just by being near humans. Sir, Commander Vextal said quietly, what if the humans are right? What if we've been doing everything wrong for thousands of years? Admiral Zethkar looked out at Earth, where his demonstrations of military power had become the planet's favorite entertainment, where his warriors were learning to paint and sing and grow things instead of destroying them. He was beginning to understand that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their abandoned nuclear bombs or their museum full of deadly technology. It was something much more dangerous than that. It was the simple, radical idea that war wasn't necessary at all. 3 weeks into the invasion, Admiral Zethkar faced a crisis he had never trained for. His army was dissolving, not through battle or surrender, but through something far more dangerous: happiness. It started with Lieutenant Klaxtar and his watercolor paintings. The young Vorthak warrior had been stationed on Earth to monitor human activities. Instead, he found himself sitting in Margaret Chen's garden every afternoon, learning to capture the colors of sunset on paper. Look, Admiral, Klaxtar said when summoned to explain his behavior. He held up a painting of roses. I made this with my own hands. I created something instead of destroying it. Admiral Zethkar stared at the painting. Klaxtar's claws, designed for tearing flesh, had delicately guided a brush to create something beautiful. The warrior's red eyes, bred for spotting enemies, had carefully studied the gentle curves of flower petals. You're a soldier, Admiral Zethkar said. Soldiers don't paint flowers. Why not? Klaxtar asked simply. What's wrong with making beautiful things? Admiral Zethkar opened his mouth to answer, then realized he didn't have one. In Vorthak culture, beauty was weakness. Art was pointless. Only warfare mattered. But looking at Klaxtar's painting, he couldn't understand why. The problem was spreading. Sergeant Vorth had learned to play human music and was teaching other soldiers. The sound of alien warriors singing folk songs echoed through the ship's corridors. Captain Zexmal spent his off-duty hours helping humans tend their crops. He claimed that watching things grow was more satisfying than watching things burn. Even worse, the humans were teaching the aliens their history. Not just the nice parts, they shared everything. They showed them how humans had once been just as violent as the Confederation, how they had fought terrible wars, enslaved their own species, and nearly destroyed their planet. We weren't always peaceful, Dr. Martinez explained to a group of alien soldiers. We were quite good at war, actually. We just learned something important along the way. What did you learn? Asked Commander Vextel. That winning a war doesn't solve the problems that caused the war in the first place. It just creates new problems. So we decided to solve problems instead of fighting about them. The aliens listened with growing confusion. Their entire culture was built on the idea that the strongest should rule, that victory in battle proved superiority. That conquest was the natural order of things. But these humans had been stronger than anyone, had conquered their entire planet, and had then decided that strength wasn't the point at all. Admiral Zethkar tried to maintain discipline, but it was impossible. His soldiers were experiencing something they had never felt before: peace. Not just the absence of war, but the presence of contentment. They discovered that humans didn't just avoid violence. They had built their entire society around cooperation. Every human institution was designed to help rather than harm. Their schools taught children to work together. Their governments existed to serve their people. Their businesses competed by creating better products, not by destroying their competitors. It's so efficient, Captain Zexmal reported. They accomplish more through cooperation than we ever did through conquest. That's impossible, Admiral Zethkar replied. The strong survive. The weak are consumed. That's the law of nature. But sir, look at their planet. They've eliminated poverty, ended disease, and stopped war entirely. They've accomplished everything we're trying to achieve through violence, but they did it through cooperation. Admiral Zethkar looked at the reports flooding in from his officers. Earth had no homeless people, because they had built homes for everyone. They had no hunger because they shared their food. They had no crime because they had eliminated the conditions that created criminals. They had achieved paradise, not through conquest, but through kindness. Meanwhile, Admiral Zethkar received increasingly angry messages from the Confederation High Command. Supreme Commander Valdris was furious. Admiral, your demonstration period is over. It's time to force these humans to submit. Begin destroying their cities. Admiral Zethkar felt something strange in his chest when he heard the order. For the first time in his military career, he hesitated. Sir, perhaps we should reconsider. These humans might teach us. Teach us? Supreme Commander Valdris roared. We are the Confederation. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. We don't learn from prey. The order was clear. Begin the destruction of human civilization. Start with their cultural centers, their museums, libraries, and art galleries. Show them what happened to species that refused to submit. Admiral Zethkar knew he had to obey. But as he prepared to give the order, he thought about Margaret Chen's garden, about Clackstar's paintings, about the human children who had drawn pictures for his soldiers. He thought about the Museum of Human Mistakes, where weapons of incredible power sat behind glass as reminders of a violent past. The humans had the ability to destroy his entire fleet, but they chose to make tea and cookies instead. Sir, Commander Vextel said quietly, the crew is ready for your orders. Admiral Zethkar looked around his bridge. His officers stood at attention waiting, but he could see the doubt in their eyes. 3 weeks among humans had changed them all. Target the Louvre Museum in Paris, he said finally. Fire a warning shot. Minimal damage, the bridge crew hesitated. Destroying art felt wrong somehow. But orders were orders. A single beam lanced down from the ship, striking the ancient museum. Part of the building collapsed and priceless human artwork was destroyed. Admiral Zethkar waited for panic. For anger. For the humans to finally understand what war meant and beg for mercy. Instead, he got a video message from the museum's director. The woman stood in front of the damaged building, tears streaming down her face. But she wasn't angry. We're so sorry you felt you had to do this, she said. Those paintings and sculptures were thousands of years old. They were part of our shared human heritage. But we understand you're trying to make us afraid. She paused, wiping her eyes. We're not afraid, though. We're sad. Sad that you think destruction is the only way to communicate. But don't worry, we'll rebuild. We always do. And when we do, we'll add a section about your people, about how you came to visit us, and how we hope to be friends someday. Admiral Zethkar stared at the screen. He had just destroyed part of their cultural heritage, and they wanted to build a monument to friendship. Sir, His communications officer said, "We're receiving thousands of messages from Earth." Admiral Zethkar expected curses and threats. Instead, he found messages of sympathy. Humans expressing sadness that the aliens felt so desperate, offers to help rebuild not just the museum, but the Confederation's relationship with Earth. Children had drawn new pictures for the alien soldiers. "We're sorry you're sad," read one note. "Would you like to help us plant flowers?" That night, Admiral Zethkar walked the corridors of his ship and found his soldiers gathered in small groups talking quietly. They were discussing what they had seen on Earth, how the humans lived, what it would be like to create instead of destroy. Lieutenant Klaxtar approached him in the hallway. "Sir, permission to speak freely?" "Granted. I don't want to be a warrior anymore," Klaxtar said. "I want to paint. I want to grow things. I want to help instead of hurt." Admiral Zethkar looked into the young soldier's eyes and saw something he had never seen before in a Vorthak warrior. "Hope. You can't just stop being a soldier," Admiral Zethkar said. "Why not?" Klaxtar asked. "The humans did. They were warriors once, and they chose to become something better. Why can't we?" Admiral Zethkar received the final ultimatum from Supreme Commander Valdris. The message was short and brutal. Destroy the human cities. All of them. If they won't submit, they must be eliminated. This is your last chance, Admiral. The Confederation had run out of patience. They had given Admiral Zethkar 6 weeks to conquer Earth, and instead Earth was conquering his soldiers. Hardened warriors were learning to paint and sing. Military officers were growing gardens and reading poetry. The greatest invasion force in galactic history was turning into art students and farmers. "Sir, what are your orders?" Commander Vextal asked. She stood at attention, but Admiral Zethkar could see the sadness in her eyes. Neither of them wanted to destroy the planet below. "Prepare all weapons," Admiral Zethkar said heavily. "Target the major population centers. Begin with New York, London, Tokyo, and Beijing." But even as he gave the orders, Admiral Zethkar felt sick. Over the past weeks, he had walked through those cities. He had seen children playing in parks, families sharing meals, artists creating beauty. The thought of destroying all that life felt like poison in his soul. The attack began at dawn. Massive energy beams struck Earth's greatest cities. Buildings crumbled. Museums burned. Libraries were reduced to ash. Millions of years of human culture and history disappeared in minutes, and still the humans did not fight back. Instead, they began to rebuild immediately. Rescue workers pulled survivors from rubble. Doctors treated the wounded. Engineers started planning new buildings before the fires had even stopped burning. Artists gathered to recreate lost masterpieces from memory. But most amazing of all, they began incorporating alien architecture into their rebuilding plans. Buildings rose with curved walls inspired by Vorthak design. Gardens were planted with patterns that honored Thanarian art. The humans were using the attack as inspiration for cultural fusion. Admiral Zethkar watched from his ship as humanity responded to destruction with creation. They mourned their losses, but they did not seek revenge. They simply began building something better. A message arrived from Earth. Admiral Zethkar expected it to be from a government leader or military commander. Instead, it was from Dr. James Wellington, an elderly physicist he had met during his first visit to the planet. "Hello, Admiral," Dr. Wellington said. He was sitting in a simple chair in what looked like a study filled with books. "I imagine you're wondering why we don't fight back." Admiral Zethkar found himself leaning forward. He was wondering exactly that. "You want to see our weapons, don't you? Our real weapons. Not the museum pieces, but the ones we actually built during our worst wars." Dr. Wellington stood up slowly. He was very old, Admiral Zethkar realized. His hair was white, his face lined with wrinkles, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. "Come down to Earth, Admiral. Come alone. I have something to show you." Against all military protocol, Admiral Zethkar took a shuttle down to Earth. He met Dr. Wellington at a facility outside the ruins of London. It looked like an ordinary research building, but Admiral Zethkar could sense something different about it. "This is the archive," Dr. Wellington explained as they walked through corridors lined with sealed doors. "This is where we keep our real military history. Not the sanitized version in the museums, but the truth." He stopped at a door marked with symbols Admiral Zethkar didn't recognize. Dr. Wellington pressed his hand to a scanner, and the door opened. Inside was a room filled with computer screens, technical drawings, and models of weapons that made Admiral Zethkar's blood freeze. These weren't the primitive guns and bombs from the museum. These were weapons that could destroy stars, turn planets into projectiles, and unravel the fabric of space itself. We called this one the Solar Killer, Dr. Wellington said, pointing to a sleek device no bigger than a briefcase. It could make any star go supernova. We built 12 of them during our final World War. Admiral Zethkar stared at the weapon. His scanners confirmed what his eyes couldn't believe. This single device could destroy entire solar systems. This, Dr. Wellington continued, showing him another display, was Project Galaxy Burn. We figured out how to turn black holes into weapons. We could have rewritten the laws of physics in a localized area, making life impossible for thousands of light years in any direction. The displays continued. Weapons that could stop time, reverse gravity, or create matter from pure energy. Humanity had not just mastered warfare, they had turned it into a science that bordered on godhood. We had plans to weaponize entire dimensions, Dr. Wellington said calmly, to turn reality itself into a battlefield. We could have conquered not just our galaxy, but every galaxy that ever existed or ever would exist. Admiral Zethkar sank into a chair, his legs suddenly weak. Why? Why didn't you use them? Dr. Wellington smiled sadly. Because we realized something, Admiral. The same intelligence that let us create these weapons also let us understand what they really meant. What did they mean? That we were too dangerous to exist. That any species capable of building these weapons would eventually destroy not just themselves, but everything else in the universe. We were facing a choice: become gods of destruction, or learn to be something better. Dr. Wellington touched another display, and Admiral Zethkar saw footage from humanity's final war. Cities burned, oceans boiled. The sky itself seemed to be on fire. Billions died in conflicts that lasted mere hours. This was our last war, Dr. Wellington said. We nearly ended all life on Earth in a single day. And as we stood in the ashes of our civilization, watching our children die from radiation poisoning, we realized something profound. What? That winning this war meant losing everything that made us human. So we stopped. We destroyed every weapon. We disbanded every army. We chose to learn cooperation instead of perfecting competition. Admiral Zethkar looked around the room filled with the most devastating weapons ever conceived. You gave up godhood. We gave up madness, Dr. Wellington corrected. Because that's what it was, Admiral. Madness. The belief that strength came from the ability to destroy. That victory meant making others suffer. That conquest was the purpose of existence. The old human sat down across from Admiral Zethkar. Your confederation is very impressive, Admiral. You've conquered hundreds of worlds. You've built a mighty empire, but you're making the same mistake we made thousands of years ago. What mistake? You think power comes from the ability to hurt others. But real power, the kind that lasts, the kind that actually solves problems, comes from the ability to help others. To create instead of destroy. To cooperate instead of dominate. Dr. Wellington gestured to the weapons around them. These devices could destroy your entire confederation in minutes. We have the power to remake the galaxy according to our will, but we chose not to use that power. Because we learned that having the strength to destroy everything doesn't make you strong. It makes you dangerous. Admiral Zethkar felt something break inside his chest. All his life he had believed that military might make him powerful. That conquest proved superiority, that the ability to destroy was the ultimate achievement. But sitting in a room filled with weapons that could unmake reality itself, weapons that their creators had voluntarily abandoned, he began to understand something that terrified him. Humanity hadn't become peaceful because they were weak. They had become peaceful because they were so incredibly strong that they could afford to be gentle. They had transcended warfare not through defeat, but through victory so complete that they no longer needed to fight anyone. Your people, Admiral Zethkar said slowly. You're not pacifists, Dr. Wellington laughed. And Admiral Zethkar realized it was the first time he had heard a human laugh since arriving at Earth. It was a warm sound, full of genuine joy. Oh no, Admiral. We're not pacifists. We're just gardeners who used to be gods of war. We decided we preferred growing flowers to burning worlds. Outside the archive, Admiral Zethkar could see humans working to rebuild their destroyed cities. They sang while they worked. Children played in the rubble. Artists painted murals on damaged walls. They had been attacked by the most powerful military force in the galaxy, and they were treating it as an opportunity to build something better. Admiral Zethkar realized that humanity had already won this war. They had won it 3,000 years ago when they chose to put down their weapons and pick up paintbrushes instead. Everything since then had just been the universe slowly learning what humanity had already figured out, that the real victory wasn't in conquering others, it was in conquering yourself. And as Admiral Zethkar watched children teaching his soldiers to plant flowers in the ruins of their cities, he began to laugh too.